Hello. Looks like it's been another week. So what is this thing we do? It's the Cloud Natives, Cloud Native After Dark. Is it dark where you live?
It's 1 in the morning, so yes.
How dark is it where you're at, Jason?
It is not dark at all. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm actually in the middle of my Monday.
Just another Monday. So there's
Just
a
another
there's a few
Monday.
things happened last week. We could talk about those. A few things are going to happen this week. Those should be fun to talk about. Reinvent is always a good time when you're trying to talk and think about clouds. I got Kenny reading the Borg paper. He was just complaining about the. Actually, why don't we start with that as a topic? That's kind of a fun topic. So,
Yeah, it's a
so
lot of fun.
Kenny, why don't you
A lot of
why don't you
content.
tell everyone here what the comments you just made in our Slack channel? What were why don't you kind of make that like your impression, kind of as a developer? What developers need to know after the first taste of the Borg paper?
I'm still making my way through it, but something I find interesting is that there's this architecture that they've described in this paper, which really I think it's a benefit if you have your own data center, but I don't think it's the right model if you're going to create like a management API for cloud that has different providers. I think it really goes to the lowest level, and the model's kind of weird. But I'm halfway through it, so we'll see.
So this is Google's secret weapon for a decade that they kept secret until that was very recently published. So what do you think's weird about it,
Yeah,
or how
you
do you
kind of
even
have to learn a whole set of terminologies. Go
like
ahead.
you have to be a domain expert even.
Yeah, you have to be an expert at cloud before you can get started, which is, kind of tough right now for enterprise. I mean, they don't have any time to do that, right? They're in the process of building applications and they can't wind down and, learn a whole set of things to get started with cloud. But, there are other models out there that I think that are more suitable. But I think it's good as a paper so far.
I mean, to be
Again,
fair, and you shouldn't say the word cloud. There's a bunch of computers connected to the network, right? And there's a architectures that have certain capabilities, that have certain basically that architecture that was kept secret. Not everyone in Google understands that. Not everyone in Google has to, right? As a developer in Google, for the most part, the abstractions that you deal with are not always raw VCL or whatever the language is for Borg. Anyway,
right, yeah.
It's probably
What do you think,
also it's
James
probably valuable.
or Bridget?
Oh, I was going to say I think it's also valuable to remember that when Google started working on Borg, like people weren't really thinking about public cloud. Like I know when I started working at the University of Minnesota Supercomputing Institute in 2005, there was a guy who actually left that same supercomputing institute that year and went to Google as an SRE. So like they were starting to work on that stuff, kind of pattern after typical HPC at that, even earlier than that.
I mean, in some sense, the way that it's abstracted in that world, you're not actually. It's a different paradigm than you get from a public cloud provider anyway. Really, and that's sort of where some of the stuff is moving to, but it's very different when you start looking at those uh, scheduling algorithms. It's kind of different than what you get from the public cloud API on something like Amazon. Anyway, I think it's interesting. We're gonna have more conversations like that in our public channel, in our private channels. There's also a little. We've been talking about doing some kind of compare and contrast some of these tools. Looking at Mesos, looking at Mesos and Bosch. Like, how do all these things kind of fit together? Where do they overlap? Where do they differentiate?
Awesome.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty interesting. I've just started. I know Kenny and I and Josh Long and Casey West have been playing with Bosch a bunch this week. So this is it's a powerful tool. I'm not entirely surprised at some of the like bag of knives type behavior that I've run into since Schaefer warned us, but it's a pretty powerful tool. I think that when I understand it better, I'm going to like it better. I like it a lot now, but I think I'm going to like it even better.
I think that the way, and this is actually stealing from Colin, and maybe we can coax Colin to come on here tonight. But we were having a conversation about this in London at Operability, and the comment he made is that Bosch is a tool with some sharp edges that's moving everything in the right direction, instead of some of the other tools which might feel a little bit more kind of soft and warm, but aren't necessarily moving things in a better direction. Like the paradigm's better.
Makes sense.
Waters, you're awfully quiet.
I loved it.
Me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm quiet.
Tonight you have been.
I'm busy working on slides, so I'm just chilling with the gang. Happy to be part of the crew.
Okay.
Can I get the jacket?
Yeah. You can wear the patch.
Waters, are you in your office?
Why, I would certainly not be in my office with a stack of Diet Dr. Peppers I've been drinking all night while I sit here. That's absurd, Bridget. How dare you? Put this one on the stack.
I mean, because it's Waters, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he had a Cloud Foundry banner behind him at home, too. But
That's actually this new Cloud Native banner. Carly I have this really cool original Cloud Foundry Wall Street Journal ad that I usually have on my desk, and Carly, for some reason, took it down. I was heartbroken. Carly,
you're showing us your whiteboard. There's probably OPSEC on there that you don't want to.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole Q3 of customers. That's really cool.
Oh, funny.
Red Hat's like, oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Nice.
I'm going to see if I can coax Colin out.
I'll go erase that so I can behave like a normal civilian on this hangout.
So Kenny, I was just gonna ask Kenny for the for the stuff you and Josh were working on. Can you tell us a little bit about the secret machinations that were occurring down in LA?
Oh yeah. So actually, whenever I'm in the same room as Josh, it's just like a feed of information right into the brain. It's kind of like a fire hose. And so that was kind of the point of this weekend. And so what we went through was creating a service broker on Cloud Foundry. So a lot of that was actually learning how to run Cloud Foundry in Bosch Lite on your laptop. So right now, actually, my computer is screaming to me because I'm running Hangouts and I'm running all of Cloud Foundry on my laptop. But I finally got it working tonight, and so the subject of a lot of what Josh and I were talking about was creating a service broker that you can run on Cloud Foundry that manages an FTP. So you could basically have a distributed store where you can pass files across different services that integrate with the broker, which we're writing a book about, so it'll be more simple then.
Nice.
I think so.
And this is being written in, of course, Cloud Native Java.
That's the name. That's the title of the book.
So I'm guessing that the service broker is also that way.
Would you write the
Yeah,
Java?
so the service broker is Java, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say service brokers can be in any language, but you guys
The only thing they have to be in is HTTP.
just have to talk the little REST endpoints. So what else
so in
is going
Cloud
on?
Foundry, service brokers.
Keep going.
So service brokers can be shipped with applications. So if I have a Spring Cloud application or a Spring Boot application, I can just list a service broker as a dependency, and I can ship it to the cloud, and it'll be Cloud Foundry, and it'll be automatically provisioned, which is nice. So we're writing a chapter on how you create these service brokers that maybe can run as a API on top of a database. For instance, like Neo4j runs as a server, we can write a service broker that will connect into it remotely. You just have to describe the connection details.
Indeed.
It's a lot of fun.
Kenny, do you like computers?
I hate computers. They're the worst.
Worst thing ever invented. Bridget, you're going to reInvent, right?
I am. I'm flying to Vegas Tuesday morning because I love Las Vegas so much that I figured making the trip as short as possible would work well. So
Which-
flying in Tuesday morning, we have Pivotal is an AWS partner, and so there's a partner event during the day Tuesday. And then there's a reception thing in the X Hall or whatever Tuesday night, and we've got some client meetings starting up right away Tuesday night. And then there's a whole bunch of that during the day Wednesday and Thursday, and then of course each night there's the typical get together and chat with people outside of the context of the conference, and then home Friday morning.
It sounds rather conferencey.
I've been told that I'm one of the more technical people that Pivotal is sending. So I did spend this weekend trying to get more up to speed on some of the Bosch and Cloud Foundry stuff. So I think it'll be fun. It's a giant trade show, but then a bunch of people I know are also going to be there. Of course, it seems like many of my friends have gone to the vendor side of the force. So
The vendor side of the force.
yes, I think it'll be a good time.
Darth Waters.
I mean, I was thinking about it today because we're thinking about doing Platform Conference next year. Bringing that back. Best name ever, if I say so myself. But the problem is that we want to do it pretty big, and so the number of places you can find we can have a big conference goes down. And then you're like, well, do I do the soulless thing and go to Vegas? Because doing it at downtown in San Francisco at Moscone, you schedule that like 8 years ahead of time. From Moscone West, it's really hard. So I guess the question of the room is, how do we feel about soulless conferences in Vegas? Is that allowed for Pivotal, or is that not allowed?
I mean, I think if you want to hold your conference in Vegas, that gives you a lot of cheap airfares from everywhere, right? Because airfares to Vegas are loss leaders for the casinos. So as long as people are okay with the ding, 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 ding noise of
I
slot
hate it. I
everywhere.
personally don't really like recycled cigarette smoke and ding, 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 ding.
I mean, even at your gate, right? When you're at McCarran, like you get to enjoy that noise at the gate.
No, it's like people sitting there like playing them like.
I mean, this is cosmetic stuff, right? Like that's not important.
I just don't like the ones where the people have the tracheotomies. Like, I don't like that one.
So depressing. So yeah, I mean, that stuff those are cosmetic problems. Like I'm not super worried about that. I think it's more if we're gonna hold a platform conference, I think it's more important that we focus on making sure that all of the communities related to Spring and Cloud Foundry like get their opportunity to really shine at the event.
I'm still hoping for New York City.
Oh.
Yeah, but New York City is like, oh hey, welcome to $600 a night hotels for everybody.
Hey, bro, have you rented a hotel in San Francisco lately?
I didn't say San Francisco. I'm talking about the virtues of Vegas.
I know,
The
but
virtues of Vegas, like we
if
got
you
a
had your
warning,
way,
we
you'd
got a
have it in
warning
San Francisco,
email.
right?
Huh?
We also got a warning email from corporate marketing warning us to not have a heart attack when we saw our Vegas hotel bill when we check in. So
That's not too bad.
apparently it's going to be worse than I paid at the Intercontinental across the street from the Pivotal offices last week. So.
All right, no conferences for us ever. Apparently, there's just the entire country sold out for the next 2 years.
I guess what I'm saying is it's probably fine, and also you might want to look into Minneapolis. I mean, we already signed for DevOps Days Minneapolis for next summer, and Minneapolis is starting to get sold out. But 3-hour flights to everywhere is not a terrible thing.
You're really going to push the Minneapolis agenda.
No, I'm not going to push it. I mean, Cote probably wants us to hold it in Austin. And that's the trendy new choice, right? I mean, OSCON, ChefConf, a whole bunch of places are going to Austin for some reason instead of Portland. So.
What do you think of Bangkok, Jason?
What do I think of Bangkok? Well, it's a bit far for a EU audience. I love the fact that they have visa on arrivals and a hugely connected international airport. It's like basically in the center of all of APJ. So for me, it works great. You know, it's in between Singapore and Hong Kong, and it's significantly cheaper to rent a condo here. It's a wonderful place to do my laundry in between travel, basically, is what I'm saying.
I'm laughing because place to do my laundry between travel is starting to seem like a very valid reason that my condo is located where it is.
All right, so what's a new little technical thing that happened? Oh, the other thing, last week we had a bunch of events. You guys went to there was a meetup at the Cloud Foundry Foundation. You guys went and hang out with Docker. You went to Code for America. What else went on? Or maybe we could do a little bit of a reprisal of the.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Hang on.
To go to the Cloud Foundry event, but I bet Nima has some thoughts for us.
Yeah, Andrew, before you jump off to any other events, let me chime in. One more thing to consider for Vegas. If you're going to be in town and you're going to the reInvent conference, swing by our booth, come say hello, and we'll invite you to a little tiny gathering we're having on Wednesday night, just between us and a couple of close friends. So it'll be a great chance to have just a little sit down with the rest of the Cloud Foundry team in a little more of an intimate setting. Some are overlooking the Vegas Strip, so.
But not creepy.
Not creepy. We made sure it won't get creepy.
Why would it be creepy? It's going to be super cool. We're going to talk about platform, services, platform as a service, PaaS, and all the other words that drive Schaefer crazy.
That
was my only shout out. It's the only reason I joined the hangout.
It's computers connected to the networks. We got Eric Windish online, who's me and him and Jason had some adventures back in the day.
Eric, isn't it 2:17 in the morning where you live?
I'm in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you introduce yourself, Eric, and what's got you up after dark tonight?
So I used to work with Andrew and Jason at Cloud Scaling. I'm currently with Docker. I guess I'm employee number 16 there. Actually, I've been there for almost 2 years. It's not too late for me to realize that this is actually happening. So usually I'm sleeping when this is going on.
That's awesome. You work at Docker, or you did?
He does.
I still do.
He works at Docker right now.
That's
Hey,
awesome.
Eric, I got to visit your offices with Casey West from Schaefer's team this week.
Yeah, I just saw the pictures.
Nice.
I'm glad we retitled this to Cloud Native, so now everyone feels like they can come in. It's not just CF.
Totally.
It's like your pub.
Actually, Eric, when I was in London last week talking to the garden team there, they were talking about all of the work that they're doing with Runc. Like, can you talk to us at all about any involvement whatsoever that you have with, like, the OCI stuff, or, how you're observing it from afar and from your corner of Dockerville?
What are you actually working on today?
So I'm working on the security side, doing some of the nuts and bolts and working with the security management processes, and so forth. I'm not so involved in Runc currently. I was involved in a lot of the initial discussions with it, but I haven't been terribly involved in the last couple of months at least.
So was that just like a stroke of genius? It was like, okay, so we're going to just erase all of these, ridiculous attempts to do something different, and we're going to say there's going to be a standard, and everyone's going to get on board. Like, how do you make that leap from the closed to the open?
Well, the Runc is kind of the second shot at that, because there's also libcontainer, which had a little bit of a fits and starts to get to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a push, a realization that we needed to create plumbing, right? So we're trying to break off pieces, not just as libraries, which was kind of phase one, but this phase two is to push out usable binary Lego bricks, per se, that can act as independent plumbing. And I think that's, I mean, you're saying, Bridget. I mean, there's there's really a way to gain acceptance and trust by a community and to get utilization of tools. And it's a lot harder for people to consume libraries than it is to consume tools, clearly. So being able to push out tools is much easier for us to gain user acceptance of those.
Yeah, it's a Unix philosophy, composability.
Right. Yeah, and also I think we also got a bit of slack for not doing it earlier, right? There's certainly people in the community that felt like we should have been doing it all along. As a startup, it was about running fast and getting things to work. Once we got things to work, we could step back and look at breaking up plumbing.
Yeah, and I probably should have seen it coming from all of the discussion of plumbing that Solomon had going on at DockerCon, but like it was just at that moment when he put up the slide with the dove and the olive branch in its mouth, and started like I was getting my phone ready at that moment because I'm like, all right, is Pulvey going to go up on stage? And it's like actually Solomon stepped off the stage and shook his hand, but like it became clear at that moment that was going to happen.
It was actually funny because the day before, Solomon was like, so by the way, we may or may not have a special guest. And apparently it wasn't planned. He thought, maybe it would happen, but it wasn't actually planned to happen. And then it happened, which was kind of nice. But yeah, it was kind of impromptu in the end, which is why, Alex was kind of at the bottom of the stage and like, with this awkward grasp.
But it was still, I think it was still a really good moment.
It was great.
And Waters, you were going to comment.
Well, I mean, I think number one, people forget how fast moving these markets are. Like Docker went from being Doc Cloud to Docker in like a year. And then everyone's like, well, and you haven't created an industry standard group for this yet? How dare you? You know what I mean? So I think a little bit of the somewhat violent kinetic way that Pulvey kind of like threw down and demanded it, and like I think it's just fine. Like it just worked out. But I think you got to have mercy on people because this whole thing unfolded in like what 6 milliseconds of collective time.
Totally. I was happy to see how it came out though. Like that ties into what we were just talking. Waters, you and I were just talking about this. Like this idea of collaboration and community even between vendors because we're trying to make a better experience for everyone. And saying, I have my tiny corner of the universe doesn't make a better experience for everyone.
I mean, when I talked to Ben Gullo briefly, and I don't talk to him much, I mean, that's what, Scott Yar and I went over and paid our respects once. And our only message was, look, software vendors in general are not killing it. Like, if you look, Amazon is the 10,000 million pound monster that's making all of the money. And if we don't provide a unified experience to people that still use software without just buying cloud services, like, we're kind of crazy. So I think that's really important on collaboration. In fact, my whole walk to work today, Bridget, I was thinking about how you can be an awesome Docker on CF person for us because you have all those human connections and that's like half the battle in these very human businesses. So, at least let me ask him. She tells me she's popular over at Docker Inc., but maybe I should verify. Maybe she's just pulling my leg.
I think we're happy and disappointed that she went to Pivotal.
Hey, to be fair, I talked to you folks before I talked to Pivotal, but you wanted me to move to San Francisco. It's like distributed teams for the win, man.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, but
yeah, good thing you didn't have to talk to James. I'm just trolling. It's okay.
Oh, James would not have insisted that I moved to San Francisco.
I was not insistent on that at all. In fact, Schaefer DM'd me. He's like, "Hey, Bridget wants to work at Pivotal." I'm like, "Is it done yet?" That was my response. That was my hard-ass response to the situation, clearly.
Oh, but yeah, I heart Docker, so I'm really glad that like we have exciting collaboration stuff ahead of us with them.
Yeah, if you want to see something pretty epic, look at the Google search trends for Docker. Just if we're getting a Docker credit, like it's pretty much it's pretty much the new Bash RPM. Like it is at a nearly universal scale of Linux system administration adoption. So I think you can't ever take that away from those guys.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, considering that when we were sitting there installing Cloud Foundry on our laptops and fighting with which version of Ruby, we were like, you know what would make this better? Docker. Like, we're seriously going to package up a Docker image for testing Cloud Foundry on your laptop.
Why not? No, I mean,
We are, because like this, I mean, I know a couple of people have done something similar before, but I think like we need an official Docker image from Pivotal to run Cloud Foundry locally, like for your test.
We're going to support Artifactory on the platform with Docker images. And I reached out to Ben and I said, hey man, do you want to be on the platform for Docker images? And I think the only small conflict is they don't know where their portfolio ends. They're like, well, someday we might want to build a whole exact replica of Cloud Foundry, so let's just keep our safe distance, which is totally cool.
That's someday. That's not today.
But I think that Docker is going to be sort of a universal, system image style format, and that's really important that we have that. Because who wanted a whole AMI? Did anyone ever build an AMI back in the day? Oh my God, that was not fun in 2009 building AMIs.
Yeah, and honestly, like when you're trying to hand whittle this stuff, and I've spent plenty of time doing that, like just the comfort of saying, hey, I have a Docker image, and I will never again think about which version of Ruby this is. Hey, let's RVM versus RBenv, because apparently there's some sort of difference between how the two are behaving. Casey and I were running into this week. Ugh. It's just like
we switched to Go for a reason.
I know.
The Ruby that's there is not. There's a reason Go was used. Like I remember when we switched to the CLI is what came first, and suddenly like the CLI was super easy to install. Like it used to be trial by fire to get the CLI with Ruby environments going for people.
Totally. So, but anyway, yeah. So I'm really excited that Eric is here. So Eric, tell us more. You're in SF this week. What sort of exciting stuff are you going to be working on? Is this like all Notary all the time, or what's the plan?
So actually, we have some new people starting this week. So one of the goals is just simply to get the security team together. We haven't been together in at least for a couple months, at least in a way that made sense. We were at LinuxCon together, but there's only so much interaction that you get when you're at a conference. So a big part of it is just getting the team together. And we also have some projects that I can't quite talk about right now that we'll be working on, but yeah, will be interesting.
You know, this is CFAD. CFAD is the home of secrets. Like the only reason that people stay up this late to watch it is because I always spill beans, like left and right. That's what makes this a cult hit. Is that there's no secrets on CFAD, or CNAD as it's called now.
Waters is the worst for that too. Like there'll be like embargoed press releases for the next thing, and he'll be like, "Yeah, I'll just tell you."
Well, because like 8 people watch this at like 1 a.m., so they deserve like the cult insider track, I think.
And it's only 6 more hours until it's out there, so.
It's pretty good stuff. So that's
at least on the security side, we occasionally use some OPSEC. So
I heard a rumor that Docker was even putting people to work on Spring Cloud and Spring Boot. Actually, I heard that they were aware of these projects' existence. Is that just a crazy rumor, or is that true?
What are you talking about?
Crazy rumor?
I'm actually not aware of what you're talking about at all.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense.
That's why I'm here.
I believe you.
Yeah, so I will pass you a link, Eric. It's pretty cool. So Spring Cloud basically allows you to do all these great things with Java for cloud-native applications. I wrote a couple blog posts. You can do polyglot persistence. It's all JVM-based. So I'm selling you here right now on this, but I'll send you the blog post, and it's all Docker compatible, which is good.
It's basically service discovery, circuit breaker, all the patterns that let you stitch together a distributed app at a client client level, as opposed to just an environment variable or system metadata level. So you can do dynamic config of your app or dynamic failover.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Docker is that we've grown so much so fast that even if there was somebody working on it at Docker, I wouldn't be surprised. Um, I'm not involved in it though. If they are,
I just heard a rumor through the engineering organization, and I was like, "Huh, that would be weird." It's pretty high level for those guys, but you never know.
So I see Tushar just joined. Hey, what's going on over at 875 Howard? I mean, other than what's going on in Waters' office, since he's apparently physically there right now, but for you, what's going on over there?
Nothing much, just like we had a 219 deploy recently, and there were a couple of weird issues we ran into in terms of how many, uh, like some calculations were messed up in the DEAs, the way they report metrics. It was reporting some negative metrics, which should always be positive. So we're doing a postmortem about that soon. So that's new.
Yeah, I saw Casey was trying to upgrade on his laptop to 219 over the in-flight Wi-Fi. I think he tweeted something apologizing to his fellow passengers.
So that's something that's you guys figured out what's going on, or there's
We haven't yet figured out down yet, but there is some. It's a way the cloud controller reports how much free memory is on the system. So we just increased our max in flight to like a larger number because deploys take too long currently. So in that, we basically ran into an issue where there are like the number of the free memory that is being reported by the DEAs with like we use overcommit on our production system. So with the weird overcommit factors, the math got all messed up. So we are just trying to like we're doing a postmortem early this week. So let's see how that goes.
it's so fun to dog food your own software all the time.
And now the DEAs are also like kind of changing, right? Because when we go to 1.6, the elastic runtime changes.
1.6 ships with both styles actually.
Oh, okay. So, but does the default change, or is it just that the opportunity is there for people to use the new runtime?
It's basically shipping with both runtimes. So the Diego factor or whatever will the first time that'll see the light of day in our on-prem product is in 1.6, but that's already been running in the Pivotal Web Services for a while.
There's the Diego tracker, so people can see all the stories that are happening right now, live, and in living color.
Oh, see, this actually takes us back to the topic that we were starting to talk about before we wanted to close the loop on reInvent, which is that going to the Cloud Foundry Documentation Summit was really interesting because I think that there were other people there from not just Pivotal and not just the Cloud Foundry Foundation. You know, Stormy was there from the foundation, which was great. But there were also people there from HP, and there were people there from IBM. And these are people who are very appreciative of the fact that Cloud Foundry is being developed in the open. It's like, hey, jump in, look at our tracker. Here's our GitHub. And it's like the fact that this is open source software means that we can be collaborating with some really great people from across the industry. Like what we were specifically working on at the Doc Summit was trying to improve some of the docs. And we did find a few things that we definitely needed to work on. But that was pretty cool.
So in specific, what kind of stuff did you work on, or what did you find?
Yeah, so what Casey and I specifically worked on, Casey West from Schaefer's team, worked on was the reducing that mean time to dopamine that Schaefer likes to talk about. Like making, because, you know, say you go to use Docker, I mean, in minutes, you're like, hey, I did a Docker run, and it's like really exciting, and yay, you accomplished something. And if you start trying to use Cloud Foundry from scratch, there's kind of a lot of stuff to install and figure out and wait for downloading Blob Store, and like it takes a while to get to the point where you get to be like, yay, I've pushed an app, it's fun. So Casey and I walked through like just rewriting that part of the documentation to get it to be much simpler, much easier to be able to try something right away. And that's where we were like, okay, now that we figured out exactly how to do this, we're totally making a Docker image so that it's easier. And what some of the other folks worked on were things like coming up with some better iconography. I mean, very much like ripped off from, hey, what AWS does or whatever, in terms of like, if we want to have images that show people like, go do this with Cloud Controller. Well, what does a picture of a Cloud Controller look like? So they started working on that. Or
it would be really nice to have iconic, like just this little template of meaningful icons that is kind of the reference architecture, especially as we start to look at some of the stuff that's evolving around stuff like Lattice, where you say, okay, like here's how you could do this in production. Here's how you could compare what's here with this deployment to what you have with the full Cloud Foundry. I'd really like to see that happen. It's been on the backlog for a while to make that happen, but it kind of blocks on having a graphic designer.
Yeah, and we didn't have a graphic designer in this documentation sprint, so we definitely had people sketching out what should exist, but maybe not the actual pictures of what it would be. But let's see, there were also folks working on just like coming up with the elevator pitch, like one word or one sentence definition of what is Cloud Foundry, like just making it easier to digest. Again, this is like a pretty big package of software. So. And let's see, we also had somebody working on updating the documentation for launching Cloud Foundry on AWS instances that you spin up, because there were a bunch of references in there to things that AWS has since deprecated or changed. So I think that there's probably an ongoing need to make sure that the open source side of stuff, like the documentation, stays up to date. But it was kind of great, like having a bunch of people jump in and just start working on it right away.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the way that Cloud Foundry's evolved with the formation of the foundation. There was sort of an abdication of some of the stuff that was waiting for the foundation to be active, but like no one was taking and making it like whatever it could have and should have been. But now that you have people like Stormy and the rest of that community, I'm really, I think it will change the dynamic when, as you said, the mean time to dopamine for Cloud Foundry gets shorter. Like that will be better for everyone.
Now, I was kind of curious if, even though Eric's more on the security side and this isn't his main focus, but I'm kind of curious, like there's an awful lot of, hey, getting started with Docker, a zillion tutorials out there. But does Docker, I've never even asked anyone at Docker, does Docker actually do anything specific to try to guide or select from the stuff that's been written to kind of feature like this is probably the ideal tutorial?
So I think there's certainly been a strong focus on having the documentation, the official documentation, be of high quality and have a certain number of tutorials that are part of that, and that's community driven. So there are employees that work on that, but it's community effort to drive that documentation, and I think the goal would ideally be to make that documentation really, really good. Meanwhile, the marketing department also does a certain amount of effort to highlight those in weekly digest emails to community aware of like blogs that hasn't yet been brought into tutorials that are part of, again, official documentation. At least that would be even my personal opinion, right? Where our documentation should be good enough that you don't need to go elsewhere, right? And being open source, we really need to drive contributors towards that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have with Cloud Foundry, because since Cloud Foundry solves really large problems for large enterprises, there maybe aren't as many people who are looking for that like super fun stand something up themselves project that reach for it. I mean, most people sitting there hacking away in their basement don't necessarily need a whole bunch of role and access control. So
Yeah,
like the problems that whose problems, I think Casey tweeted something this week about the people whose problems you solve are the ones who are going to jump in and start participating.
Yeah, I mean, you do see like there's a good blog about using apps on CF today, like hosted PWS. I mean, the history of the project that it was originally, developed to be a cloud service, and we later decided, hey, it'd be novel to ship it as software too. So it's sort of one of these things where it was hosted to begin with. That was like their developer outreach was always meant more for the hosted API. And then we found, lo and behold, that the Fortune 500 would, pay mightily to have their own, kind of cloud service in their data center that they could use. And that's sort of the evolution of the project. The question is, how many people in the world in the Fortune 500 want to blog about setting up a big cloud service in their data center at the top secret company that they work for? It's just like it's a little bit less than the number of people that are going to talk about getting their Rails app going with a local Redis.
It's interesting to see the dynamic because in some of these organizations that we work with, it's actually prohibited, right? And then there's a transition that's happening in some of them when they start to view the software capabilities as a competitive advantage, and they want to be able to recruit from these different pools, where they start to do it a bit, and I think we're starting to see that in our ecosystem, even though for some, I mean, maybe this goes a little bit back to Kenny's point he was making at the beginning, like what they tend to talk about and blog about is that higher level architecture at the app level, and not so much at the kind of infrastructure platform level. It's only kind of a thin band of people of interest that are kind of getting excited about it at all.
Now you're making me curious. I'm going to have to go look and see exactly what Target put on their tech blogs. I know that they, like Heather McMahon and other folks from Target who help with DevOps Days Minneapolis, are actually, have been doing like some public tech blogging about what they're working on inside Target. But I have to go see what level of stuff it is.
I mean, there's some very deliberate efforts inside of the ecosystem around Cloud Foundry where what are traditionally enterprise companies are doing whatever they can to try to project an image that they think will help them recruit from the talent pool, right? And they know they're like
Did you see the Bank of New York ad that had this? I mean, on the very positive side, Bank of New York put a magazine ad that said the first banking member of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. We're innovative. So I do think that we are a enterprise aspirational brand to some extent for recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting to see that flip switch where what these organizations that had framed IT as a cost center and even said, I mean, in many of the meetings I've been in, you'll hear the people that are there, and most of them are they're essentially the choir, if you will. They're the champions of the movement, but they'll have yeah, I saw that. They'll make the comment that their executives for so long have said, we're not a software company. We're not a software company. We're not a software company. And then they're all of a sudden waking up and they're like, oh my God, we better be a software company.
Your competitors are going to be if you're not.
Look, I think that's over. I mean, even Gartner has said that organizations will be more 75% build, not buy over the next 5 years to 2020. So by the time Gartner says it, it's like already 2 years true.
Well, I think that these movements are not evenly distributed, right? Like I was in a meeting on Friday where we're still seeing some of that residual, where at least the group that was in the room, they're already bought in, but they know that their internal challenges are really social engineering this transformation, where not all the leadership's necessarily bought into the idea that they're a software company, right? And their deployments going back for however long are, primarily the off-the-shelf software, and then that is augmented by these, one-off SOW-driven outsourced software, and their internal capabilities haven't ever really been developed. But then all of a sudden they turn around and there's like thousands of software developers on staff trying to manage, and glue all these things together, and they're really waking up, but it hasn't fully taken effect yet.
I kind of wonder if these trends are the same or different, like worldwide. Like Jason, do you see in APJ like this trend is accelerated or it's lagging? Like, what's the difference or the similarities do you see?
Yeah, I think it varies depending on the region across APJ. I mean, I think that I guess the way that I would think to say it is I think that the business requirement from a lot of the companies that recognize that they need to go this way is kind of surfacing at the same time as the tools enable it. So if you look at, before we saw a lot of, the Spring Cloud and this type of technology enter the Java ecosystem, if companies were really looking to build large distributed systems, they would be looking at Erlang OTP or something similar, which there were virtually none of those skill sets available in APJ. I mean, Erlang OTP developers are almost non-existent. And if you
there's not many of them here.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I know. And if you ever wanted to do something even as simple as, parse a string in Erlang, you probably would rather shoot yourself in the face. So it wasn't really conducive to a lot of the use cases that most enterprises had. It was very specific to telco switching and things like that. So I think that, it's kind of a perfect storm of events where we see the businesses needing to go this way for business requirements. And then also from the other side, that the technology enables that in a lot of the talent scope that they already have inside of their company. So it's definitely very present in Asia. We're seeing a lot of momentum in China, a lot of momentum in Korea and Japan. Some of those markets are incredibly competitive. I mean, it's amazing to me how much or how big of a gamble you are willing, or that the Chinese companies are willing to take. I mean, a lot of them are almost, it's like they're putting their whole business on the line for it. I mean, they're that hungry to move forward quicker than the perceived pace of other people. So it's pretty interesting.
Definitely, and I saw that there's actually, we've been away for a while. There's actually a DevOps Days in Singapore now. Coming in about a week. It's October 16th and 17th. So.
Yep. I'm actually speaking at it, so I will be there.
Can you tell us?
We've had a lot of events.
Can you tell us what you're going to be talking about?
Nope, but I'll send you all the YouTube link after. You're not the first person to ask me, and I can't tell you because I actually haven't figured that out myself. I'm noodling on some slides as this is going on, so if I seem a bit disconnected on the conversation, that's why I've been exposed.
That sounds like
I'm on slide 1 with writer's block, to be perfectly honest, but I'll figure it out. I got lots of time.
That's the Schaefer method.
Well, I figure if nothing else, I'll just throw up random pictures and look to make it up as I go along. And what's the worst that could happen, right? I mean, there's only going to be about 150 people in the audience, so it's not, it could be worse.
It'll be on YouTube forever, so.
No pressure. No, it'll be fine.
I thought the Schaefer method is probably fine, but I thought the Schaefer method is to write the slides the day of. Like, if you're writing them a week out, you're probably ahead of the game.
So the core problem with all of this is that I am not Schaefer. So there's some people that can get away with this, and then there's people like myself. So
it'll be fine. I'll help you if you want.
I've got to do a half-hour presentation to the board of directors, and I'm just going to riff it Schaefer style. So
it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Wait, James, you're just going to put up a picture of a Gatling gun and say competitive advantage.
Just say Pivotal Labs. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, my board slides, they kind of go like this. They go like, hey, all of these companies are trying to do DevOps, but they can't because their middleware is super clunky, and it has a big WebSphere sticker on it, or a big WebLogic sticker on it, or a cheaper but still crappy JBoss sticker on it. And they can't configure those things rapidly. But on Cloud Foundry is like the easiest way to ship code on a cloud-native platform ever, and people love it because it comes with built-in failover and easy update. Because people don't understand this, but companies right now in the Fortune 1000 are handing IBM truckloads of money to give them a bad Java experience. Kenny, back me up.
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
Oh yeah, you're saying good things right now.
And I think,
and I'm taking notes too.
Like, sometimes I think the DevOps community doesn't always think about the Java app community, and it's not like that's the only thing in the world. But it is such a stranglehold in a lot of the enterprise architecture of a lot of these companies that unless you crack that iceberg open into little pieces and ship it off, like you're never going to automate it away. Like the worst thing I hear ever is people like, oh, it's cool, just throw that giant monolithic thing in a container. Like I'd love to get the Docker community's opinion on this. Like I'm a hard ass about like not forcing like our container system to run like old super monolithic slow starting apps. Like how do you guys think about that in your community when someone's like, no, I'll just put my old mess and I'll jam it in the container and that's better, right? Like am I being too crazy by not loving that?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what the solution architects are telling people, but I think there's a high preference for microservices, right, as an architecture, greenfielding and starting that way whenever possible. There's certainly a set of users that are doing maybe not giant monolithic apps in one container, but certainly going slow with it and combining several applications in a container. And perhaps people who are putting monolithic apps in a container as well, right? Like, giant stacks in one container and just scaling everything with more RAM and more CPUs in a single box, right? They're buying the Linux One or something and just, a giant mainframe system or something. And I'm sure those users exist. And I don't want to discount like their use case, but certainly we certainly prefer that people go with the microservices route.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell you because this is CNAD, so it's late at night and we're allowed to share secrets. Like one moment of disillusionment was when I heard officially a customer tell them that someone from Mesosphere had suggested that they try to run Microsoft Exchange on Mesos. And I was just like, I threw up a little bit in my mouth because, like, I know that they really want to be like a big, impactful thing, but the only thing that makes me love working on this project is we get to be hard asses and be like, you will be cloud native. Like, you will write apps that behave in cloud native ways. They're like, we don't want to automate your old junk. And when I heard that someone tried to, have you ever run an Exchange server, right? Like, just throwing that in a container system and hitting the tables in Vegas, man, that's...
And I have not run an Exchange server, but my contention would be no one should run an Exchange server because it's 2015.
But still, I would make the argument though that if you're going to run Exchange, if you're committed to running Exchange, you should run it in containers.
This is a Jesse style. Let's run it in containers and let's run Steam in a container and it'll be awesome, which I agree with. But then you got to think like, wouldn't those people's lives be better if they just decided to not run Exchange?
I mean, I guess it gets back to, do you want to turn containers into the new VM, or do you want them to be like an advanced lifecycle, management? Like there is really a serious debate there around re-implementing everything that a VM did in terms of storage and networking versus viewing as a part of a more opinionated microservices fabric.
So I would argue.
I heard there was not running Exchange.
So for a developer, I would argue that the VM really you shouldn't be worrying about the VM. You should be worrying about compute, right? So what's the unit of compute, right? And then also for a monolith and shoving it into a container, what's the point of scaling your application? Meaning, what are the points within my software that I can abstract out, take out, put into a different container, and scale that independently of the rest? And that's, I think, where we need to go, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good debate, and I always come down that way. And I've just noticed in like my EBCs though, like increasingly customers are like, oh, thank goodness for being kind of like very opinionated, as opposed to maybe entertaining them with like jamming their previous problem there.
I think this is the fundamental point that I make when I'm faced with this same question: is are you really going to get that much better economy or efficiency out of this automation on that old stuff? I mean, the incremental improvement that you can make there is relatively small compared to what you could do investing in this future architecture.
Well, if you've ever been to VMworld, do you know what it actually is?
What VMworld is?
A storage conference. Like, actually go and watch and walk the halls and see what all the vendors are talking about. it's like billions of dollars in R&D of storage magic to put behind VMs to make sure that they keep state and that monolithic things run well. I mean, that's why EMC owns us, right? They make so much money off of like SAP and Oracle and all these monolithic things because you need tons and tons of storage magic tuned out to make it all work. So I guess if you want Docker to become the next like place that storage magic lives with expensive storage systems, then yeah, by all means. But like I had that. I worked at VMware and I'm bored of it.
It's actually very interesting, James, because I have seen the tendency of a lot of these storage vendors to approach Docker now, right? And they're trying to figure out what their game with containers is, and they're all, you know, looking at this as a maybe not a lifeboat, but you know, they may need it as a lifeboat in the future potentially, right? And they're like, what do we do if VMs, you know, are going away? What do we do about containers, right? Because you know, DockerCon is not a storage conference, right? As VMworld is.
But that's what you get when you put monoliths in containers, dude. You're gonna get there again. You're gonna need all kinds of magic storage arrays.
So yeah, so I mean, Docker already has volumes, right? And volumes, I mean, at some point you need to have persistence of data, and Docker volumes are the way to do that, and it's pluggable, and you can connect, you know, your storage arrays, your storage subsystems into that.
Do you really want to talk about storage drivers? Because I have so many feels about those.
Honestly, you kind of need to. I mean, as much as people want to rotate off of it, even if you go to a microservice architecture, you still have data problems that you got to solve. Like all your hard problems are the data layer.
And that's what you've seen it in a VM still. That can totally live in a VM. You don't need to move those around fast. They don't need to be.
I think that's an interesting conversation that we may or may not have time to have fully tonight, but I made this point in the meeting I was in Friday. When you're looking at all these different layers of the stack, they all have different time scales, right? And at the top of the top, you have like this developer who wants to be able to do test-driven development, and he's making rapid changes and he's getting rapid feedback. And then below that, you're going to go to production. So there's some cycle, some cadence to go to production, deploy that stuff. And then below that, you're going to have like the platform itself. Like when do you update the platform, right? That's an application. And then below that, the way we do things with Bosch, like that, the platform itself is on top of another platform. So how do you update Bosch? How do you update this stuff? And at that very bottom layer, you have the state, right? And that's where like it's a much slower time scale. You're not going to continuously deploy storage arrays. You're not going to continuously.
That's where we're going, man. Like I worked at Sun, dude. We had containers. We did it, and they were never as popular because they didn't solve the speed and developer appeal issue. And all I'm saying is that when you're working on your Exchange server, it's not really about speed and developer appeal. That's all I'm trying to say here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
So I mean, so back to the monolith story, right? So with the monolith.
Oh my God! If you're working on your Exchange server, it's really about finding a new job.
I'm telling you.
Pivotal is hiring.
Let the man speak. Let the counter argument come.
So there's the developer story, right? And then there's the operations story. And you know, Docker makes sense for Exchange on the operations story, not on the developer story, right? And you know, and those operator gains can still be seen when you're using containers for these monoliths. You're not getting that efficiency, Andrew, right, of the greenfield application on the developer side if you're not going to microservices, and certainly.
I mean, but I guess what I'm asking there is like, what is the operational advantage, right? Like at the point where you got to go into the middle of this thing, which you're going to, and like figure out what's wrong with it, then like I guess. So like I see sometimes where people have projects and they're like wrapping stuff in containers, and I'm like, what's the actual benefit?
I just want you guys to
I should mention that I have actually done this exact thing that you're describing, which is trying to clean up a bit of a mess that was a graphite server that was set up by someone who no longer worked there. You know, it's the whole like cursing the name of the previous engineer thing. Not cursing his name, but you know, someone had set up a graphite server, and no joke, the Docker exec, like the command for this, was the shell script to launch all of the things. And it was a horrible mess because if any one of the components would fail, then the container would still be chugging along. But like, maybe Whisper would just not be, like the Whisper database would just not be being written to anymore. But you could still hit the web app, or maybe vice versa. Like the web app would be down, but we'd be like, well, got to bounce the container. We'll take a short outage on letting new metrics trickle in because the web app died. And so like everything is all wrapped together in this giant, ball of bash. And it's like, was that better? No, certainly not. We needed to tear it apart.
Overheard giant ball of bash. That has to immediately be overheard.
But I mean, was that better than breaking it down into components? Certainly not. But was it nice to at least know that we didn't have to try to put the graphics server together again? Like, hey, at least we can take this Docker image and we can take this, upstart job to start it, and we can start this giant mess again, like from scratch, and have it be exactly the same giant mess it was before. Yeah, there's definitely an operator advantage there.
I guess what's the incremental advantage of that over just running that bash on bare metal?
Oh, it was a question of getting all the stuff installed. So like if you wanted to set that up again, like we didn't have to worry about ever getting it all configured and set up again.
That one thing that you already had packaged, but you're still running bash.
There's still bash everywhere. There's bash in Cloud Foundry, and you know it.
Oh, I know.
Right. But all that bash is contained, right? It's all contained as chroot, and you can just delete it. You can recreate it. There's lifecycle management, and you have to keep in mind a lot of these monolithic apps couldn't be run inside of VMs for performance reasons or whatever various reasons that organizations would concoct. Like Exchange as a perfectly bad example, right? A lot of people didn't want to run Exchange in VMs because of performance, so they'd run it on bare metal, and then they didn't have.
Maybe they should have gotten better storage arrays. Did you ever think of that?
But to your point, Eric, it makes perfect sense that you get much better benefits from the developer experience if you have, greenfields as far as the eye can see. But if you're stuck with a pile of badness, then at least containing it is slightly less bad than the alternative.
I think the question is, like, I don't want to work at a company that delivers slightly. Like, I get up every morning to deliver effing amazing. Like, I like walking into a company and just, like, dropping down. Like, I'm going to give you a revolutionary experience of delivering software with an operational leverage you couldn't have dreamed of 2 years ago. I dare you to plug in our product. I dare you to use it. So, like, when I hear these other people talking about slightly, I'm just like, dude, my life is way too short. I could have been a novelist of some regard. But, like, I want to work on something.
I want to see that novel.
Epic. You know what I mean? Like, I want to work on something epic. So, like, I get bored sometimes where people in tech, they're like, I want to be the next incrementally better automation tool that's temporarily fashionable. I'm like, no! That is super boring.
I don't think anybody aspires to that. I'm just saying that when you're talking about the developer versus operator experience, I've spent a good deal of time in ops life, and sometimes everything is on fire and it's probably fine. But if you can make it slightly less terrible, that's nice. If you can make it fucking amazing, that's way better.
Totally legit.
I mean, so my wife, she's a CPA. She works at a 40-person firm, maybe 50-person firm. They have one ops guy, no developers, right? And he just has to, he runs an Exchange server and he runs a Zen server and, and this various infrastructure. And, he just puts stuff together. And, you can't expect him to greenfield anything and, not invent here anything besides maybe a configuration for a container, at least when the Windows containers come out live for him, because he's definitely not running Linux.
I feel like Office 365 was created for organizations like that.
There's a product called Gmail, and it contains all of these things.
No, I totally worked at a startup where I moved us from Exchange to Gmail because, oh my God. But there is a little bit of hinkiness.
These organizations are like, 75, 95% of the organizations that are out there.
No,
and there is some weirdness with the calendaring between Google Apps and the Microsoft Suite. So, like, I would just say for people like that, look at Office 365. Your life could be less sad.
Right.
And to be honest, VMware is a $6 billion company because of exactly that.
Right.
Like, that is exactly what they help people fix.
Right. In fact, right, like it's that 80-20 rule, right? Like maybe the 20% of the revenue are these these companies, these big companies, Fortune 100s and Fortune 500s that are doing greenfield applications and using Docker and Cloud Foundry natively. And then the other 80% are these companies, that are VMware's bread and butter, that just want to, practice law and do tax returns. And they just have one guy doing ops.
Yeah, because IT is a cost center, not a competitive advantage.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I just have a vision of their SaaS for people that don't really want to create or do software. And that is the smart way of going, like SaaS thyself, go to the cloud. And then there's people who want to compete digitally. They're like, look, like we work with Dish Networks. They spoke at a public Cloud Foundry meetup in Denver about this. And they're like, the CIO of Dish, he said to me, hey man, I am got to be the speedboat amongst the cruise ships. We got to be the best digital competitor. We bought Sling because we're going to take on these other people. We're going to use Cloud Foundry as our delivery mechanism for all these kick-ass apps. Like, come in, help me get my culture right to deliver these apps, and just totally kick butt. Like that's a different part of the market for sure, and that's our specialty. I mean, that's what we kind of get pumped up about. That's why we have Pivotal Labs, which helps people develop software. Dish also uses Pivotal Labs for continuous to deliver software. And Bridget's kind of the interesting person because she comes from a sysadmin background, right? Like that's what she was doing, and now she's in custom software land. And there's crazy people like Kenny telling her about like Spring Boot, and what the heck is that?
Kenny hasn't totally convinced me that I want to experience more JVM stack traces than I experienced when I was running a Hadoop cluster. Just going to put that out there.
Yeah, I'm just buttering you up first, and then I'm going to sell you on it. It'll happen.
We'll see.
You're reviewing my book, so.
Yeah, if O'Reilly ever adds me to the Atlas thing for it, I haven't gotten any emails about it.
No, but I guess that's a question, like for a customer that wants to completely rewrite a new digital app and continuously deliver it as a team, and they don't want to have a lot of sysadmins, they just want to have software developers. What's the right thing? Is it Amazon? Is it build your own, roll your own? Is it a...
I'm laughing because have you seen AWS's APIs? Like, good luck understanding Amazon's VPC if you have no ops background whatsoever.
You know what's funny to me about Amazon? You know what CIOs or CTOs tell me about Amazon? This is the funniest thing. They come to me and they're like, I really appreciate that you have a set of opinions because my team has spent the last 8 months debating which of the million services on Amazon we should use.
And there are a million too, right? Like how many of them like just start with S and are 3 letters long? If you just limited your search space to that, you would still have choices to make.
I don't think you end up with less sysadmins moving into these. I mean, you differentiate the operational responsibilities in a sense, but it's still nice to have someone who knows how the computers work, which is not often what developers are doing.
Well, this is actually what Cote and I talked about when we did that Pivotal Conversations podcast a little while ago, which is that it's not that you don't have a job, it's just that your job is a lot more interesting because you're not, running that storage array.
I think you break linear scalability though. Like what I tell customers about this is what they need to do is get out of, I want to do another project. I need another sysadmin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean that's cloud native, right? If you don't have these ratios, you're not cloud native, right? Like if you can't manage this number of machines per sysadmin, you're not doing it right yet.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. So it's not the sysadmins go away, but I hope you don't have to like, hey, I need to write a new app. Okay, I better go grab. You know what I mean? Like you have like.
Well, if you do it the way most of these enterprises that consider this as a cost center do it, you don't actually get more sysadmins. You just overload them with like 80 dev teams and then wonder why nothing works. That's what most of them are doing.
And that comes back to the culture question, though, right? Because that's certainly going to lead to a situation where you've set up competing incentives, and these people are going to hate each other.
Absolutely, and that's why they all hate each other.
Oh, so, and the linear chunking of this all goes this other way because budgeting usually means you budget for a dedicated sysadmin team when you do a new project. And so when you do a new project, you have to budget for it in a very waterfall way. And like I can't tell you how many of our customers have said just budgeting processes don't make as much sense. Now that they have this platform they can just keep delivering apps on, they're used to buying environments per app and teams per app.
In a waterfall, yearly budget cycle.
No, I mean, like this is like IT culture is pretty much like ERP made it that way. Like everything came from the $200 million Accenture ERP bid.
Damn you, Accenture. Now, when you're talking about like the teams relating to each other and whatnot, I know when I was talking to Tushar, like you're not actually on Cloud Apps, right? Like you were rotating into the Cloud Apps team when I was visiting the SF office, right, Tushar?
No, I was rotating off the Cloud Ops. I am actually on the Cloud Ops team.
Oh, you are actually on the Cloud Apps team. This is the funny part is Tushar was working on a dev team. And he's an apps person for Pivotal, and he was working on a dev team when I was there.
Yeah, I was working on Bosch.
Yeah, that's pretty. I think that's pretty amazing. Like if your organization can take a sysadmin and move them to a development team for a while and have them work with that team, like that just says something not just about Pivotal in general, but like specifically, but about like organizations in general. I have not worked a lot of places, some places, but I haven't worked a lot of places in my life where that would actually even fly.
I think it's one of the best features of Pivotal is the way that you get to see so many different things.
So this is a good question. This is Cloud Native After Dark, right? Is there a Cloud Native culture? And is it distinct?
I think that there are certainly characteristics that demarcate the capabilities of these organizations that are getting these economies that are distinctly different from the cultures of those that are not.
Would they, for instance, run Exchange servers?
I'm going to go with no.
Right.
I'm going to go with they don't want their people to be that unhappy.
Like Pivotal was started from scratch, and we have no Exchange servers, right? Like we're owned by EMC and VMware, so we could have all kinds of expensive storage with VMware virtualization and Exchange. But you know what we did? We did not get a vBlock and put Exchange on it. We called up Google and we're like, everything on Google, everything.
We got a vBlock and put Cloud Foundry on it.
To test the thing, dude.
I know, it's awesome.
Roll me.
That's not where P-dubs run.
No, I'm not trolling. No, but Pez is there. It's awesome.
This product engineering investment. I guess I'm just saying, like, we had a blank slate 2 years ago, and there's like, it was SaaS first, SaaS only, SaaS, everything.
Here's a real question. Why did you take that as pejorative that I said we had a vBlock that we're like running Cloud Foundry on?
Well, you argued. You were.
No, I wasn't. I love that thing. It's awesome.
Schaefer, you love everything with a V at the beginning of it. Are you a V expert? Are you holding out on us?
No, that's not the case. But the fact that you have this this piece of hardware and software that you can run stuff on, it's nice. I'm not gonna lie.
But that's this back to your point about the way a cloud native, which by the way I still have my questions about that term, Waters. We talked about this, which is I worry about what folks were talking about. What are we using for cloud immigration and naturalization services? Like if people want to become cloud native, but they didn't start that way, I worry that we're making them feel excluded or like there isn't a good path. Like, how are we messaging that?
Oh, that's pretty much Cote's job, I think.
I think to me it comes down to a value statement that I wanted to aspire to write things that were built to be automated deeply versus trying to automate things that were built however. And my belief is that until you start thinking about architecture when you design things for operability, then you're just generating more legacy and you're using the fashionable automation tool of your day, and those will change. And you only have to look at like the tragedy here is if you look at a company called BMC. Have you ever heard of BMC? They spent $2.8 billion trying to buy every automation company that moved. At the time, Blade Logic was a really smart automation company, and they had $80 million in revenue, and BMC bought them for $800 million. And like everyone wanted to be Blade Logic for all of 8 seconds.
2008.
And then Puppet came out, and then Chef came out, and then Ansible came out.
They couldn't buy them all.
They were already out actually before they bought them.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is that like there's been this constant sort of search for meaning in that part of the market, and I just really believe what Schaefer taught me, which is like really, if you really want to manifest the destiny of DevOps, you have to structure your applications in a way that they're designed to be fit into a platform that expects them. Like, and I just never turned back from that.
It's
like
the contract. Promises and contracts.
Like, I'm going to go off and hire Kafka committers to this company. Like, we're so lucky we have such an obscene budget. Like, I can just snap my fingers one day and be like, "Dear Ryan, hire Kafka committers." And you know all I'm going to have them do? I'm going to have them make Kafka more operable. And then I'm going to see if I can hire some Cassandra committers. And I'm going to see if they can make Cassandra more operable. Because right now there's an imperative garble in a lot of managing those clusters. And I really think if we're serious about this, like everything we do, not just apps, needs to be built for operability.
So it sounds like what you're saying is thinking about cloud native means
notice that the data layer is what is hard. Just make that note.
persistent, always tough.
As a consumer, you can't change it. Like Kafka, like these things come with embedded contracts that you know.
Not only that, but there's this thing called physics. It's cool. Don't worry about it. Anyway, you were going to ask a question, Bridget.
Oh no, I was just trying to synthesize what I'm hearing from the two of you, and I would love to have some other people jump in on with their thoughts on this too. Looking at you, Eric, but it sounds like what we're saying is that the idea of being cloud native is being mindful of making sure that this stuff can actually run in the sort of platforms that we expect, and is planning for and expecting to act in an operable way in the environments it's going to be running in. Like putting that idea, that amount of mindfulness into it is what we're looking for.
So I mean, I think that James was coming to a point, which was he gave this example of a company acquiring every tool that they could until they ran out of money. And the fact is that there are always going to be new tools, right? Like you just can't get ahead by buying everything. Certainly not without a strategy to tie those things together. You know, interoperability is certainly probably one of the next big frontiers that we need to cross, because we're not really there yet. I mean, I've been for the last 2 years been promoting this idea that like tools like Docker and Cloud Foundry are solving problems of getting the machine layer, you know, and the bare infrastructure to be, I guess, a little bit more compatible, you know, a little bit more abstract, so that you can say, here's a Docker container. You're going to run this on this machine, and it's just going to work as long as it's a Linux host or not FreeBSD in Windows. But you know, you have a certain amount of compatibility, right, and interoperability between those hosts that are running Docker at least, and Cloud Foundry as well. But applications themselves are not compatible with each other, right? You can't just take, you know, two web apps, one that has a generic REST client and another one that's running some random REST service, and have those two applications just talk to each other, right? This isn't a reality that we live in. But with things like the IoT, the management tools that we're building today, the lifecycle tools that we're building today, are going to need to evolve to manage millions or billions of devices, and obviously not in a hub and spoke model, because that would be ridiculous. They would just never work, right? And most of these IoT platforms are being built around the hub and spoke model, which again is not working for IoT. We don't have the compatibility, right? We're talking about introducing millions or billions of devices into the world that are going to be IP addressable, and they're going to be running APIs, and none of these things know how to talk to each other.
I mean, there's certainly scalable stuff. Well, let's just, I don't know why. Someone's there.
So I mean, all I'm saying, right, is that like we have new frontiers to cross, right? Like there are so many problems that we have not yet solved that we need to solve, and everything that we're building today is just a stepping stone to to what we need to build as the number of devices that we're building grows.
I think that
the complexity is going to scale, right?
there's an aspect of this scale, but there's also, and this is kind of the point I think we were trying to make before, which is that you need to build things in a way that they can be recovered in a certain time frame with a certain amount of effort, and hopefully that effort can be pushed close to zero. Whenever you have automated something, it might be automated in a way that you can reproduce it, but it takes some time to do it, and it's a stateful process. So when that thing fails, then however long it takes to get that stateful process set up is the lower bound on how fast you can recover, right? And so if you build things in a certain way, then you can operate under conditions of partial failure, and I think that's a big part of what I consider this kind of cloud native architectural advantage.
Yeah. So
partial failure.
I guess my perspective on that is that to do that, right, and you're talking about a cloud native culture, and culture is much harder to change than the tools. And we need to automate as much of that as possible and eliminate the friction to having that culture, where that culture isn't just something that people learn to do, but it just becomes the path of least resistance in terms of tooling and automation.
Absolutely. You have to make doing the right thing the easy thing.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, we've been doing this for 80 minutes, so.
Yeah, but I think it was really good to not just have like our point of view. Like I thought it was really helpful to have the other point of view. I mean, it's a really complex world, so thanks Eric for hopping in. And
next week we'll invite an exchange administrator.
We will club him.
He or she is going to be wondering why. By the end of CNED next week, it'll be like, why do I even do this? I should go work at Pivotal. They're having more fun. Or at Docker.
So unless anyone has any final last words or secrets, I think we should go to bed. I think I should go to bed.
I was just getting excited. I wanted Kenny to tell us all about like how you should build an IoT app in a distributed system, because I think a lot of that happens at the app layer. Like everybody, like I'm almost done. Like don't forget, there's tons of app infrastructure. Like that's why Spring Cloud is really exciting. It's like apps need infrastructure too, and like it's not just like you start a process and you open a port and you're done. Like
yeah. So I'll throw in an opinion there. So I think it's the key thing that we worry about when we build distributed systems as software developers is maintainability, because the complexity in these integrations, it's very difficult to understand when you come back later. You can't really put that mapping into your head. It takes time to understand a domain. It takes time to understand how these things integrate. So cloud native culture is really moving to this idea where teams just worry about their own dependencies, and then everybody else, the entire organization will be cloud native because these dependencies will be automated. And that's really how I feel about it.
And you have clean contracts, and you keep promises.
Yeah. All right. I know we got to finish up, but James, I agree there. I was talking earlier about Last Frontier, but that Last Frontier is absolutely application infrastructure, right? Yeah. We've been building up from IaaS, the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and we're inching up to the point where we need to start solving these problems at application level.
You should check out our marketing.
We have some architecture diagrams you may find to be of interest.
We have articulated the Cloud Native Application Framework as a list of capabilities.
It was really fun tonight, guys. I gotta walk home at midnight in the middle of San Francisco. Try not to get mugged.
Good luck.
I'll see you guys.
Have you heard of Uber, James? Because I've heard it's a thing that you have.
I will like Uber.
Till next time. Cheerio.